everyone begins to go after Joe Biden. The pro-life laws are coming out all over the place, and the left does not like it. This is Matt Field, and this is Ditch Your Political Party podcast. So we're going to start off right away with all the pro-life bills. The first one that came out was the heartbeat bill by Georgia. So this is the first pro-life heartbeat bill. First off, I'd just like to say that it's a great thing that there are all these pro-life bills that are coming out. Those that are willing to protect life. Those that are willing to look past all the noise that takes place in politics and begins to put life ahead of their own agendas. And I'm a little sickened. I am sickened by the way that people are responding to this. But this pro-life bill in Georgia says there cannot be any abortion after a heartbeat is detected. So in this particular case, it's a good bill just for the state. So I think that's a strategy for the states. They want to have a bill in place that provides protection to the child once the heartbeat comes in place. There isn't really much that the Roe v. Wade or anything else like that can take it on. People can just get upset about it, and that's about it. And recall that history when that time comes, if that governor or whoever's in charge decides to run for another political office. But all in all, I think it's a good bill, and I think it'll move forward. The next one is the Alabama pro-life bill. Now that one, I think, is a direct challenge to Roe v. Wade. And ultimately, we'll have to see where it goes, but a lot of experts have said that it won't pass the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is kind of a status quo type thing, and so they're just going to kind of continue to move along their merry path. I mean, I think there are justices like Gorsuch, which would definitely move to strike down Roe v. Wade, but I don't know if it's going to have enough votes to make it past that. The unfortunate thing is that the Supreme Court has turned into more of a political body than a judicial body. And so everyone's always super concerned about the way that people will judge based on what's happening. So that's why they're all politically motivated. I don't know if there's any other way that you can select a judge, but or maybe a way in which people can qualify for the judgeship. You know, I'm not sure what that would be, but I think it'd be advantageous to have some sort of program, maybe that isn't a catch-all, but something that helps you identify individuals that have looked at the law and interpreted the law only and never legislated on the bench, which is what has happened many times, I believe, with what has happened here. Now, the Alabama pro-life bill is completely pro-life. It does not allow any abortion whatsoever. And the thing is that the reason that this probably isn't going to actually be implemented is because of the fact that it does challenge Roe v. Wade, and that there are some provisions in there that typically are provided in other pro-life bills, but I think this is just part of their strategy to kind of tick away at Roe v. Wade, and hopefully other states will follow to the point where eventually it'll give way and maybe Roe v. Wade would be, dismissed. Because there's also the Ohio bill, Missouri, Michigan, Louisiana, and Mississippi bills that are coming, full force. They're all varying in the way in which they're being passed, but I think the Alabama pro-life bill has an ultimate purpose. Now, as a member of the LDS Church, we do provide the provision of abortion in the event that there was incest or rape, but it isn't a blanket provision, right? These things are to be considered on the basis of many, many factors, and it's not a one-catch-all situation. Whereas, the Republican Party, they have the tendency to believe that, that's just the policy. That's the way it works. That's how they do it. Because in that event, it is much more difficult for a parent to obviously carry a child in those circumstances. But just because, as I've mentioned before, just because something occurred in a vicious, terrible way, it doesn't degrade the life that exists within that woman. So that's the ultimate argument, and I rarely believe would it be employed if people were, assuming that they are sound in mind and in spirit. So here we are with all these pro-life bills, and those that are pro-abortion are quite they are very upset, we'll put it that way, with what is going on right now, and they aren't too keen as to why all these things are happening. And they were going after Alabama and Georgia a little bit, but now you got all these other states coming out, and so I think they're becoming a little overwhelmed, and they can't really put their crosshairs on anything in particular. So I think this is confusing them a little bit as to where to strike. But all in all, I'm fascinated how many are going to bat for people that are really trying to push to save the life of the baby. But when the New York law came out that said you could abort a baby up until the head is about to enter the birth canal, they didn't have any problem with that whatsoever. That drives me crazy. I mean, I find that so demeaning, so terrible that people are willing to do something like that with a child. Do you know how many children would love to find a good home? You know how many children would prefer life over death? I think the answer to that is 100% of them. And granted, they probably won't always land in a good home, which is why what we should be doing is what Alyssa Milano suggested, is to be monogamous, is that we do not engage in any sexual activities unless we are inside marriage and we're ready to have a baby. So this, you can't utilize abortion as your birth control. It has to be a conscious decision of yours to make sure that you are thinking well ahead of what is going to be happening with your life. So when you decide to engage in a relationship, preferably in marriage, that you are prepared to take care of that child. And if it comes unexpectedly, because of obviously the choices you made, then you should be willing to take on the responsibility of those actions. Abortion is a very selfish decision in 99.9% of the time. And anyone that believes otherwise is essentially trying to sell you something, or they are completely immersed in politics and they can't see clearly. You have to be able to see past the noise in order to understand what is actually valuable. What Planned Parenthood reminds me of is the Dred Scott decision. The Dred Scott decision was a Supreme Court decision that was passed while things were going on with slavery, and it determined that blacks weren't people. Okay, at the time it was accepted, it was fine, because it benefited a huge number of people in the Union at the time. And I really do not see much of a difference right now. Obviously the Dred Scott decision was overturned. And it's the same thing with what's happening with the Roe v. Wade decision. And I'm hopeful that as we continue to move forward, some traction can be gained, and maybe it'll be overturned just like the Dred Scott decision was. That won't make a lot of people happy politically on the left, but it is what it is. You know, I don't think this is where I'm obviously ultra conservative, and that's because I have some personal vestures in that personally I've been able to, my wife and I haven't been able to have children biologically, and so we feel for these little children that are in those wombs, and they're not being regarded as something special when we see them that way. And I think if people began to see that children are a much greater blessing than an inconvenience, and they changed their attitude about that, then much better things would take place. So this is kind of what's moving forward, the forefront of my mind, I think the forefront of the majority of the country right now, because so many states are coming in behind it. I think it's a good thing. I hope I hope Utah comes out with something that's a little more robust, and forgive me for my ignorance, but perhaps they already have. But I think if we continue to move forward on this front, we'll be able to turn over Roe v. Wade the same as they did Dred Scott ruling. And even though it may not happen on the first one, Alabama goes in, hopefully it'll happen after many others pile on. So we're going to move on to some of the different things that are taking place with how it seems as though Trump might be engaging in some level of trade wars, and that may be, it could be at the downfall of some aspects of our economy, which is why I'd like to introduce to you, if you have not already met, our good friends over at Excess Supply List. If you are a business owner and you have inventory of a product, component, or ingredient that you no longer need, and you are dying to liquidate that inventory so that you have the cash you need to more effectively invest in your business, then take a look at ExcessSupplyList.com. This allows you to list the inventory that you can no longer use and then effectively invest it in your business. So often people are going to run into this issue, and it might be 50 pounds, it could be 50,000 pounds. It just depends on how things roll and how things fall apart, or whatever it may be. But there's usually somebody out there that's willing to buy that inventory because they've got a client or they have a need or whatever the case may be. And this is where you can begin to get the ball rolling. ExcessSupplyList.com is where you can list any excess inventory you have for free. So go to ExcessSupplyList.com, click on Publish and Add for free, and get it done. You literally have nothing to lose. It'll just have you set up an account. It's really fast, really quick. You're done in 30 seconds, no problem. So get that money back in your pocket. List your excess inventory at ExcessSupplyList.com. Again, that's ExcessSupplyList.com. So the trade wars. I'm not sure why, but I think it's, if you base it on just the income that's coming in for the United States in regard to the overall revenue for the United States government, perhaps that's what President Trump is looking at, because that's what he's basing it on, I think. Because he's saying that tariffs are good, he's saying that these things that are coming in, we're collecting all this money, it's a big win for the United States, all that sort of thing. He likes tariffs and then he doesn't like tariffs. So it is kind of a confusing line that he likes to dance along. But overall, tariffs aren't a good idea. If you are more along the lines of making sure that everyone can benefit from our, we talk about immigration and things like that, right? There are many people that are super keen on allowing anybody to come into the country, right? Now, for the most part, I agree with that concept in the sense that I think we should be a welcoming country, but we do need to have our limits, so we do need to make sure there's an ability to assimilate. But in the regards of trade, we don't have to worry about that as much. We have our inspections and all that sort of thing, but I don't believe there should be any tariff that takes place. I'm in the business of importing goods, for collecting money on those different things and all that sort of thing, and I had recently, because of some of the companies that work with me internationally, they sent me, well, not the international companies, but the people that are importing the goods, they sent me a letter recently that said, because of the new tariffs, we're going to have to raise your rate. So the idea that the United States is benefiting from this whole idea of tariffs is not true, because I'm going to have to pay for it. I'm paying for the tariffs. So that money that's going in the pocket of the United States government is essentially functioning as a tax for me. And it doesn't help me on the other end when we go to sell, because we're just going to continue to pass that on. Either we're going to pass it on or we're going to have to take the hit in hopes that at some point it will improve. But there's no real guarantee for that either. So I'm trying to think of an instance where tariffs are good, And I mentioned, one of the things I mentioned is maybe a tariff would be employed or something like that in the event that someone was knocking off a product that they were, because China is obviously notorious for taking someone's idea, back engineering it, and then selling it as their own. And so there's companies that'll import things like that, and then they'll sell them. And I mean, that's probably the only thing I can think of where you could apply a tariff to the point where, you know, they're buying it from a vendor, so they themselves probably aren't responsible. I'm not really sure on the legal aspect on what takes place there, but if you applied a tariff that made it high enough for the individuals that were selling those knockoffs, that they wouldn't have the desire to sell those knockoffs anymore, basically. But that's the only idea. That's the only thing I can think of where a tariff would be effective. But when you're taxing things like your sugar and flours and things like that, it's basically not a great thing. And I know there's a lot of farmers in the United States that suffer from or benefit from the idea of tariffs. They benefit from subsidies. All of those things, if they were gone, would improve our efficiency. Because if we want to stay in the business, well, we'll either go out of business or we'll stay in the business by becoming more efficient. So, and the problem is it's been sustained so long by the U.S. government with tariffs and with subsidies that I don't think there's any. It's possible to pull them, but it would be a very, very difficult process for the farmer, whoever it is, if we did it immediately. So it would probably have to be a gradual process over a period of 10, 20 years in order to ensure that the people can adjust appropriately to what would happen globally. So I'm not a big fan of what President Trump's doing here, but it's not going to kill us. It's just going to make us pay a little bit more. Hopefully he'll see the error of his ways and he will change that. So before I jump into, I want to get into some of the Biden politics here, which are extremely interesting to me. But before I do, I want to talk about staying healthy. Because let's face it, even though Joe Biden has been in politics for 100 years, he is still a pretty healthy guy. And I don't know, maybe he uses autoimmune health and nutrition. I don't know, maybe he does. There's definitely a chance. It's available online. So if you are interested in eating right, or if you're interested in overcoming any maybe elements of an autoimmune disease, now they don't guarantee anything. They're not an FDA approved drug. They're just a supplement, and they fall along the lines of the paleo, keto, AIP, and the SCD diet. So if you're interested in removing inflammation from your diet and body, then you should probably give Autoimmune Health and Nutrition a look. All right? They've got their line of 100% compliant paleo, keto, SCD, and AIP proteins are #1 on the market. They're the cleanest option available. So go to autoimmunehn.com, use promo code DYPP at checkout, and get 20% off your entire order. If you're tired of the conventional way of healing, then then Autoimmune Health and Nutrition can help you along the holistic path. So go to autoimmunehn.com and use promo code DYPP at checkout. Again, autoimmunehn.com. That's autoimmunehn.com, as in health and nutrition, and get 20% off your order by using our promo code DYPP. So good old Joe is plugging along in the polls, and he's doing amazingly well. Many experts had predicted, as I mentioned before, that his first day would likely be his best day, and that things would not improve all that much. But thankfully for Joe, he hasn't been making too many gaffes. He's actually been very quiet, and because of his quiet demeanor and not getting too much in people's faces, he's been doing very, very well in the polls. And that includes Bernie. That means that Bernie's been having trouble, and he's been trying to get traction. Since Joe Biden has gone into the race, he's gone from 44% to 33% of support from young people, and all of that support is going to Biden. So to get a little more attention, I guess Bernie wants to go even more socialistic. He's doubling down on eliminating private insurance, and he's doubling down on, and now he's talking about breaking up big companies like Facebook because they function, as he believes, a monopoly. So you've got this entire thing taking place. I don't know what he plans on doing there, but it's almost a replay from last election where Bernie was getting a ton of traction and was fighting quite. In fact, he probably would have been okay if he probably would have been the nominee if there wasn't if people weren't so stuck on as they said, Hillary's coronation. But and they didn't have some super delegates doing all these different things. Now they don't have the super delegates, so Joe Biden doesn't have that ability. But we'll see. You know, Joe Biden, I don't know how he does at debating. We'll see how he does there. And when he starts opening his mouth there, we'll see what begins to happen. But right now he's dominating entirely. And he stands a pretty good chance of winning the 2020 election and taking the White House. But we'll see how that all plays out, obviously, over the next year and a half or so. But you can already see that Biden is starting to really move towards the left. He kind of originally presented himself as an attack the president for Charlottesville, and his message overall was really good, and I think it really appealed to a lot of people. It's kind of like when originally Jeb Bush came to the race. I remember listening to him, his first interview, and I was like, oh, I really like what you're saying there. But then as the election went on, didn't like it as much. You know, that's kind of what usually happens with politicians, is they have a really good launch, or I guess they don't always have a good launch, but there's the ones that are, you know, bigger, more well known. They have a really good launch, but then through time, their real policies, their real thoughts, everything else come out, and they kind of just degrade and crumble away. So who knows what's going to happen with Biden, but ultimately I think he'll probably crumble a little bit, just knowing the nature of politics, because already people are talking about the global warming thing. AOC is getting upset with him for not really taking anything on, and now he's saying, no, I'm huge on global warming. I'm not middle of the aisle type thing. I'm huge on it. I'm huge left. You know, and so the more he goes to the left, you know, and I've discussed already, I believe there is an element of, there's human activity that is responsible for some global warming, but I don't think it's anywhere near as extreme as what's being presented by the media, nor by some of the politicians. AOC, we've discussed her plan before. She was standing before a group of people and speaking and recently, and she was saying that if you haven't done anything for the last 20-some-odd years in politics, then you shouldn't be in there now. And the funny thing is she's presented a plan, but when it was voted upon, none of her Democrat buddies voted for it. No one voted for it. All the Republicans and 3 or 4 independents voted against it, and all the Democrats voted present. So, I mean, she's basically sitting in the same place as Biden right now as far as global warming goes. She's just a big rhetoric person. And what do you expect? I mean, that's kind of the same thing that when Barack Obama ran, he was a big rhetoric guy. Everyone loved it, and he was very inspiring, and that was pretty obvious. But through time, you know, rhetoric only gets you so far before people begin to read between the lines. So you got to have something a little more robust than that. So I'm just going to finish off with a couple different things, and but I want to remind everyone that if you have yet to sign up for the conventionofstates.com, that you need to go do that today. So go to conventionofstate.com and sign the petition. Get on board. This will allow us to finally set some term limits, hopefully, for the senators and the congressmen and women, and so that we can finally, as has been termed, drain the swamp of many individuals that have been there far too long, which only encourages corruption when you have lobbyists coming around constantly trying to get you to move this or that bill. I mean, when you look at the net worth of the majority of these people, they are well into the millions. And that's not just because of their salaries. They do make pretty good money, I mean, annually, but it's not enough to get them to where they are right now. I mean, Bernie Sanders is doing really, really well, you know, of course, but he, as he says, he wrote a best-selling book. But there's a lot of things that take place in government that are shady, and I don't think that's conspiratorial at all. I mean, it happens all the time, and I think everybody knows it. And so it's just a matter of, we got to clean the pool out every once in a while, right? And if we can do that constantly with an amendment that filters them frequently, that gets people in there that are a little more idealistic, that aren't as cynical, and allows different types of legislation that usually wouldn't pass to pass, then I think we'd be in a lot better place. So go to conventionsofstate.com and sign the petition. conventionsofstate.com. So I just want to mention one other thing, is that Rashida Tlaib is engaging in anti-Semitic remarks. I'm surprised at how much this sort of thing takes place by congressmen and women and by senators. You know, when you are acting as a representative for a particular group, you are representing, everything that you do is a reflection upon your state, your area, whatever it may be. And when you continue to make news because you are talking about how you believe, you know, maybe the Jews or whomever it may be, Palestine or Israel or whatever, if you're putting them down, or you're doing these different things that are obviously controversial and obviously very insulting to that group of people, it's as though if somebody went up and started insulting the black community, can you imagine how many people would be jumping all over them? Even if it weren't, even if it wasn't a Republican, it'd be, if anybody did that, they'd be jumped all over. I think, anyway, maybe not, but I think. And so I think it's a matter of professionalism that is lacking here with Rashida Tlaib, and among others. Or in this, and I'm not sure why they were elected if they're running this much at the mouth and they're unable to filter what they're saying, and if those are their heartfelt ideals, then hopefully the people of their districts and states are listening closely, and they'll get rid of them on the next voting cycle, because this is inappropriate and shouldn't take place. As mentioned, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we are no stranger to the persecution that can take place. If you look at our history, we are full of persecution. And so to see something like this, especially with the Jews, they have been persecuted forever. And people can make different claims and things like that, but it doesn't make, or prophecy or this, that, or other, but it doesn't make it right that people are persecuting different people. And it's important to love one another, to uplift others, and to support the family as a fundamental unit of society. So the only way we can do that is if we begin to act more civilly, and we look at one another as brothers and sisters. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in a very, very terrible place, which, I mean, in many ways, we're already landing in that area. So since our plane is taking a nosedive, let's grab the joystick and yank backwards so we can gain some more altitude. All right, this is Matt Field. Subscribe, comment, send us a message, whatever you'd like to do, and tell your friends. Let's do the best we can. All right, thanks, guys.